everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. This week, we're talking about a lighter topic than usual. We're talking about the fate of your jewelry after divorce. And to talk about this, I've invited Joana Cunha. Joana is not only a very dear friend of mine, she's also a very talented jewelry designer and maker, and she specializes in bespoke jewelry pieces. Actually, a few years ago, she redid my wedding ring and engagement ring into a new design, and she was wonderful with it. So I thought it would be interesting to have this conversation around what do I do with my jewelry after the divorce? And that includes the rings, but other kinds of jewelry as well. Welcome, Joana. It's nice to have you.
Hello, it's great to be here.
So tell me, I know you've had a lot of experience working with different clients who come to you after divorce with all these jewels and sometimes diamonds that need to be transformed. What are the options really when it comes to repurposing wedding bands in particular?
So, wedding bands, you have different options. You can keep them in a memory box as you would keep some photographs and, later on give the gold to your children or, give it to charity or sell it as scrap. Or you could transform it into a new piece of jewelry by just reusing that gold. And it could be a piece just for yourself, but a piece that you could maybe share with your children. It could be anything that you envision.
Yeah, so really all the options are good. I know that people have those kind of debates, and I remember having it myself, that I felt like if I kept the actual ring, it was almost jinxed because it hadn't led to a long-term marriage. So I didn't want to keep it as such, and I wouldn't even see myself giving it to my daughters because of that connotation. But then, they were beautiful diamonds and a beautiful piece of jewelry, and it felt a shame to see it just sitting in a box gathering dust. What's important to know is that legally, you're not supposed to return the engagement ring. The only reason you would is if it's a family heirloom. So if whoever gave the ring, which is usually the man, if it was, his grandmother's ring or his mother's and it was in his family, he could request it back. But otherwise, it does remain the property of the person who received it. And so there's a lot of options there to do something interesting with it. Do you find that most people still stay in the ring arena, or do they go for something completely different to break that cycle?
Most people that I have, redesigned or repurposed jewelry that, is not only just, jewelry after divorce, but it could be, jewelry from grandparents or parents that also have divorced and, now kind of redesigning it. People, normally stick to rings, but there's no reason why. For example, if you have, I don't know, 2 children, why don't you split that gold and stones and make a little pendant, for each other? And it could be, just a new memory. You could get everybody engaged to redesign something, together with a jeweler, just to, create a new memory essentially, because it's important to move on and give some closure to things, and just by redesigning it, just the process itself is just a new experience, and then you can incorporate whatever are your new values, identity, what you are actually experiencing at the moment with your children as well, or just by yourself.
Yeah. And actually, the jewelry is almost a metaphor, for what happens to you. You don't want to throw it away. You're not, completely redesigning your life, but you're melting it down and turning it into something new. It's that new beginning element.
Yeah.
And therefore new memories as well around creating the jewelry.
Yes. And jewelry, gives joy. We love jewelry. And, it's a positive experience, and is also a very personal piece. You wear it on your body. So, if it is something from the past that you want to let go, you just have to let go. And, it's difficult to wear it every day, or even keeping it in a box. You can keep it as a memory, but, it makes a lot of sense to just, redesign and start fresh, as a new story.
And so in that sense, do you work with people to design the new piece of jewelry? How much collaboration happens around that design?
Yes, normally people have, ideas of, in mind of what they would like it to be. And then I just, help them in the sense that, the design needs to be functional and, also because, you might want to, I don't know, remelt two wedding bands, for example, that might not be enough, for what you want to do. You might have to use something else. So I help them to kind of manage, their ideas and develop their ideas in a more practical way.
And I remember when you did my ring that you actually created a 3D printing design, which really brought it to life because, as long as it's drawings, it feels a bit abstract. But when you're holding, you can try it on, etc. It really becomes real. Is that something you do systematically, or?
Yes. So, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing. As much as I love making, most of the pieces now are designed 3D and then print and cast. But I think also it gives, a great overview to people because even when I show the design on the computer, you might remember this, it looks totally different than actually when you see the prototype and you put it on your hand and you feel, oh, actually, this band is a little bit too thick or too thin or, it's a bit too big for my finger. So, then we can adjust things and we're just printing a prototype in wax or plastic or, resin, something cheap. So it doesn't add too much to the cost and it's quite effective, really.
Yeah, I remember really liking receiving I don't know what it was probably plastic, but it felt very real to see the actual
it's
object.
quite nice.
And are there ever cases where you can't repurpose jewelry? I don't know if it's very old or is there some sort of damage that happens over time that makes it difficult to repurpose?
If you have a piece that, for example, I don't know, has enamel, for example, that is going to be really difficult. That section, we can't really, remelt it because, we can, but it's going to destroy totally, that's enamel. So if you wanted to keep any elements, then it's not going to be possible. But also by doing that, you're probably going to lose material. But in general, even if, you're not going to be able to use all the gold, you can always use part of it. The stones, obviously, you will be able to use them, to reuse them. But in general, yes, you can use all the materials.
Yeah, and I remember that on my ring, you actually we were missing a few little diamonds because there were some from the band, but not enough, and so we just purchased a few others, and then it just looked like it was all part of the same origin.
Yes. So, if you want to redesign something and, you want to include something else that you really like, that's also a possibility. So I can get different stones or, add different colors of metal. You don't have to use just the metal that you had. So if you had, I don't know, yellow gold, you could add white gold or the other way around. So, that's also a possibility. It's all about ideas.
I love that. And so it's really a creative process. It's just a blank canvas, and you can add. You're not constrained by what you've already got. And what about jewelry that people get gifted during the marriage? So it may not be the actual ring, but it's quite common for spouses to buy each other jewelry. Have you ever had people who came to you with that kind of request?
I had actually not so much from the spouses, but sometimes from other family members.
Yes.
People want to change things, and if it is something that you really like, you can always obviously keep it and give it to your children if you have children. Or again, you can just redesign. You can get a few pieces together and use that material and remake jewelry. I guess, is a different attachment than you have obviously with the engagement ring and your wedding bands, which, most people would not feel like continue wearing it because most engagement rings look like engagement rings and most wedding bands look like wedding bands. And so you don't really feel like going around with that. Whereas, some of the other jewelry, you might still, feel like keeping it or, just giving it to your children is a different meaning and attachment than actually the engagement ring or the wedding bands.
That's true. And sometimes it's more about modernizing than redesigning in that kind of case,
Yes.
especially when you were talking about other family members giving you things. I mean, I've had jewelry from my grandmother, which, looks last century, but it has beautiful stones and it's something that I want to keep. But thinking about a new design for it can kind of give it a second chapter.
Yes, definitely. And you can even, again, if there are particular parts of the jewelry that you want to keep, you can add on other bits, for example, just using a laser technology, and then you can just add other bits that is not going to compromise, some sections that you want to keep. Imagine that you have, again, a pendant that has, enamel or a particular material that is there, or some engraving or something that you want to keep. You could add on other bits onto it without compromising it, but you still transform it.
That's true. I like that. So you're building, you're not
Yeah.
destroying. And what about people who gift themselves jewelry? And I'm thinking especially after divorce,
Mhm.
when studies show that especially women, interestingly, have this kind of high for a few years after divorce where they have this wind of independence. And it can be tempting to actually say, you know what, I don't need somebody to get me jewelry. I'm going to get it for myself from now on. Do you see a lot of people in that kind of mindset?
Yeah, and I think people should do it because, I mean, people wear jewelry because it makes them happy. People have an emotional attachment to jewelry, and it's a memory, it's about a story, or a moment in their lives that they lived. And I think it's great if you continue to do it. You could set milestones and say, I really like rubies. For my next birthday, I'm going to gift myself a ruby pendant. Or,
Yeah.
people go on holidays with friends, as we used to do when we were teenagers. You buy little bracelets. You can buy jewelry with friends that creates a memory, and
Yeah.
is a positive association to an element that for a long time maybe it was gifted by somebody else, but it gives also a sense of empowerment.
Yes.
It's you move on, you have a new life, a new beginning, and I think it's great. And I think it's a great way to build memories
Yeah.
around objects. In the same way that you go on a trip and maybe you buy a coffee cup that you really like. You're going on a trip with friends and you see some gemstones that you like, and each one of you gets one, and then you make something, or each one of you buy a bracelet that you really like, and it builds memories. I think it's
Yeah.
great.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think it adds to that sense of independence because actually we don't need somebody to buy us jewelry. It's a typical gift, especially in a romantic context, but it's something that we can get ourselves. And building those new memories around activities that are now yours alone can be really empowering. I love the idea. And I think we are often limited by that kind of idea that, if I'm single, I'm not going to get jewelry. But you can get it for yourself, assuming you
No,
can
I mean, I
afford
think
it.
you should definitely do it because it's all about the experience and the memories and that story that you're building
Yeah,
around,
exactly.
an
That's the
object
beginning.
that is jewelry, but it's helping you to move on, and it's a joy.
Yeah. And then it's something that you can pass on to your children as well, and that has that happy connotation attached to it.
Yeah, definitely.
So for people who are at this crossroads where they've just divorced or they're about to divorce and they don't really know what to do with their jewelry, what would be your advice to them if you had to give them 3 tips?
So I think the first advice would be pause it.
Ah,
Just take your time. You don't have to
yeah.
rush into anything, and keep it in a box. And then when you're ready, look at it again. I mean, think about the emotional attachment that you had to it. I mean, as you said, and actually was the case of your ring. Your stone came from your grandmother, but
Yeah.
other heirloom pieces that people might have, you might not want to give it to charity or to an auction house or to scrap it, or so think about the emotional attachment that you have to this piece, and then you can either sell it, give it to charity, or you can redesign it and get a new start, I think. But I think the most important part is just actually to take your time to think.
Yes.
Because it needs to be special.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be constantly redesigning it because you do need to use some material as you go. And I do agree. I think you need to do a bit of emotional healing before you redesign it. It's not something to jump into. Any other tips?
Find a local jeweler that you like.
Yes.
And, rather than, going into a big shop, I think it's really much more interesting if you find, if you know already a jeweler that you trust, or if there's a local jeweler that you like. I think it's a much more personal experience to go in and be part of the design process.
Yeah.
And, either you can start sketching some things, or you can ask the jeweler to sketch some things, and then help the jeweler to develop what you have in mind. And I think it's a much more personal experience than just going to a big brand and try to. I don't even know if they would do it, but I think you want to have this kind of personal human.
Yeah, you want to be involved. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what we were saying around that emotional attachment. It's not just any piece of jewelry. And so you
Yes.
want to make sure that the redesign is something that's aligned to your new life and what you want to get out of it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and if there is something that you have in mind that could be also for your children, I think it's great also to involve them. Especially if
Yeah,
they are
that's a good
in the
idea.
teenage years, you could create a piece of jewelry that either could be worn by them as well, or you could create a few small pieces of jewelry. Just share it between the family. I think that's it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. Because we always think one piece of jewelry is going to turn into just one other, but you
Yeah.
could split it up and make it into something that has another meaning.
Yes, definitely.
Brilliant. So, Joanna, tell us how we can find you for those who have this kind of situation where they have jewelry to repurpose.
So I'm based in London. If you Google my name and jewelry, you will find me. And you can contact me by email, or give me a call, and I can talk you through the process. And there's no rush. I really enjoy to do bespoke work because it's unique for each person, and it's a different story, different people. So I really enjoy that. And we can discuss options on what to do. And obviously, once we agree ideas, I will give you a quote, and we go from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joanna. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.